Steve, we're here to take a look at a prequel to one of my favorite games of the last few years, actually. This is Daymare 1994 Sandcastle, and it is the prequel to Daymare 1998 with a funny name. But what made me really love 1998, I have to say, is that it was a very Resident Evil style, similar to Dead Space, of a survival horror game. You're moving around, you're shooting zombies in that case, and have to really be careful about the ammo you use, the way you manage your inventory space. A lot of the things from Resident Evil 4 specifically that really worked out in that case. In this game, it's a very similar mold. You're a survival horror moving through these dark, dingy hallways in this sandcastle base and shooting these supernatural enemies, we'll say, and trying to survive. But some of the things that just immediately off the top kind of rub me the wrong way, to be honest, is that a lot of the things have been kind of muted and taken down a step. The survival horror is not necessarily as punchy. There's less stakes here. You can respawn at a checkpoint, for example, and a lot of the different ammo management is not really the same as it used to be. I find that you're not struggling to withhold ammunition in this game. It's more or less just crush whatever's in your way and move on forward, and that's interesting, and it works in this case, but it's just, I have to state that it does strike a different chord than the first game. One notable example is in the first game you had to manage your magazines in the inventory. So you would have to collect your spent magazines off of the floor, so you would keep an inventory of them, a good stockpile to keep reloading, of course. But in between that, you had to reload your magazines individually, combine your ammo with your magazine. Now you have a loaded gun. It's not like that in this one. And although that is important in terms of keeping the action fast-paced, it took away from that survival aspect, and that's something that's a big deal for me. But before we get into too many more of the nitty-gritty details, this is your first outing with a Daymare game, and I want to know, what did you think about it?
Do you know what? I'm having a lot of fun. I've always loved story-driven games, and I think straight off the bat, they hit you hard with straight into Area 51 as undercover to retrieve something from this, obviously from Area 51, but it goes horribly wrong. I have to say, graphically, because it is done on Unreal Engine 4, and we sort of mentioned on this now, we're getting a lot of games now on Unreal Engine 5, and it picks up more the ray tracing and more graphical features of the characters. And I found this one was lacking a little bit. It was still good, but I think once we've been spoiled with something like that, you kind of expect a little bit more in this kind of style of game. So graphically, it was good, but like I said, the story, and as you mentioned before, ammunition and fighting off the creatures, I struggled a lot because there is ammo laying around that you do collect, but if you're someone like me who's, you know, not like one-shot, headshot kind of person, it's kind of unload a mag on a creature or a monster, you seem to run out bullets very quickly. And that happened to me quite a lot. But one thing I did like in this, you actually get a frost blast, like, that goes on your wrist to freeze these, like, zombies or these artificial creatures. So you can freeze them, and then you can melee attack them to destroy them, to shatter them. But I didn't like the idea that I could have done with melee attack a bit more, or have a weapon for those kind of things, because when I did run out of bullets and you don't have enough frost fluid to top up your weapon, you're kind of a bit of in a predicament.
A lot of kind of stumbling through this map, and that was one thing that annoyed me. They mentioned that there is no map. There's a lot of different puzzles interacting with computers, hitting different switches at the right time, hacking terminals. There's a lot of these little mini games, and they're actually really fun. I wanted to explore if the nightmare mode, the hardest setting, included that resource management with your magazines and such, and it does not. At least I don't think so, because there was a bug. I can't progress through the beginning of the game to get to a section of action, and That's worrisome. But that is the only real bug I've seen in this game so far. It really just was that hiccup, and I'm not sure why. But you get into the character models, and you said something about the being an Unreal Engine 4, and I noticed that the face, I've seen faces done a lot better, would be suffice to say, but the mouth movement doesn't match the audio and that kind of thing. It's a little strange and a little bit to be desired there, but the storyline is definitely a highlight here. If you play 1994 first, you're going to spoil 1998. Makes sense because it is a prequel, but it's such a wacky story that just keeps hitting you over the head with its wackiness. And even right off the first start, when you meet Radek, his voice, he's doing like a snake impression, and that's something that I recall from 1998. Just everybody's bravado, everything is dialed up to 11, and I have to love that. I really appreciate the kind of storytelling, and it gets wacky. Being the second in the series, this is something I could talk about for a long time. I really do like these games, and I want to pass it off to you first, though. If you're going to give this a score, what do you think this deserves?
I'm going to go for a 7.5. Like you said, I love the story. It pulls me. I like these kind of things. The voice acting was on par, but unfortunately a little bit out of sync with the actual characters. And I would like a bit more choice of weapons, really, because there's not really much options on the weapons. And like, even if you had have a melee attack instead of just after the frost shot. So for me, that's why I'm giving this a 7.5 on those rounds. How about yourself?
Yeah, I really do like this game, and I think it stands on its own. It really does deserve high praise, and it's getting it from me. This might be a little confusing to understand because I look at it and I see the 1998's game. I see a lot of the features have been turned down that I really liked from that game, the survival elements, and that takes away quite a lot of what the score would be. And the texture-wise, the way it looks, it just a little bit to be desired. I'm there with a 7. This is an excellent game that stands on its own, but with a little bit of tweaks, it could have just been so much better.